California plays Stanford. Cal is the host, 2.5-point dog in a big rivalry game. We're going to hear from Chuck Edel. Chuck, this is your best bet of the week, I think.
Yeah, you know, a lot of things come into play here that are pushing me on the Cal side. Number one, we know Cal started off the season underachieving, playing underneath the number. Now all of a sudden they're starting to play better, but the number maybe still hasn't caught up to them. I think a little advantage with the number. Number two, I think it's a great spot for California here, going against Stanford. Stanford played USC. They played Washington on the road. They played Arizona in a tough physical overtime game, and another tough game last week in South Bend against Notre Dame, another really physical game. Now they come at California. I think it's just, you know, I heard some of the players this week, you know, we know it's a big rival, but a lot of players saying it doesn't seem like big game week, and then they try to make excuses like why it is. I think this Cal team sitting there at Berkeley right now just really focused on this game. They're playing better. Maynard's throwing the ball better. The running back, a new running back who's played the last couple of games, playing real well. I think this is Cal's game.
You know, I've spent most of my life in northern Nevada, and these two schools are just over the hill. So I follow this fairly closely. This is a huge game for both teams, but right now with the schedule that Stanford has played and kind of the national exposure that Stanford has, this seems like it's just a more important game to Cal. VR, your thoughts on the game?
It's a letdown spot. I mean, I know it's a rivalry, these teams, both California, but I think it's a big letdown spot. I agree with Chuck. Not only did Stanford play a couple tough games in a row, but just the way they lost in Notre Dame in a very physical game, it's extremely tough to get back up, where Cal was just sitting waiting for them. And with that said, you got to give Cal some credit. I mean, here's a team that has underachieved all season, but they always seem to produce, like we said, a first-round quarterback. They always have a 1,000-yard rusher. And I think they're getting it going. And I think this is a huge game for them, a lot bigger than it is for Stanford. And they're catching Stanford at the right time. For me, I'm going to need this line to get to 3. I think it gets there once the public gets involved. I think Stanford's going to be one of the most one-sided bet games come Saturday night, because it looks too good. I mean, Stanford on more or less a coin flip just to win the game.
And we know how high the public's been on Notre Dame, and then Stanford goes in there and basically
ties them.
Yeah, could have won the game with the help of an official blowing a call, I think, at the end of the game. And you know, and that had to be devastating to lose that game, the way they played, and then have to travel back home. And you're right. I mean, this is both these teams. I mean, you know better than anything here. Both these teams really despise each other. And Cal,
very much.
Yeah, Cal. This will make Cal's season, where Stanford right now.
This is their bowl game.
Yeah,
this is their bowl game.
I think you're right. Now, let me ask you, we've talked about the emotional letdown that Stanford may have. Do you see a physical, they've been beaten up a little bit. I mean, certainly Notre Dame is one of the most physical teams in the country.
I mean, and Notre Dame.
Overtime game against Arizona.
Exactly. And Notre Dame's going to beat you up physically.
Right.
And USC's a physical, I mean, they're a finesse team as well, but they're a physical bunch.
They're big, strong boys, yeah.
I agree.
But that was a war last week against Notre Dame. That was a war.
Yeah. It's like coming off playing the Steelers or Baltimore, when Baltimore had defense. You're going to be banged up.
But, you know, Cal's playing better. Their defense started to pick it up. They shut down UCLA. They had a pretty easy game against Washington State last week, which also gives them an edge. Obviously, with Stanford, like you said, playing that tough game, they kind of breezed through Washington State. It's just a perfect situation for them.
The one thing I want to add, again, perception. I always like to look at what was the betting market doing before the season started, before we knew anything about these teams, and it was just on paper, before we saw it displayed over the data.
And what was that? What was that?
Game of the year line on this one, Stanford -2.5. Now, granted, Luck was gone, and when you lose Andrew Luck, people were expecting a down year.
We didn't know about Nunes.
Exactly, but still, it was still Stanford and only 2.5, so not much of an adjustment.
All right, we've talked about it. Chuck, let's go ahead and make it official.
Okay, I'm going with California. They're going to catch Stanford at a perfect spot here. Stanford coming off 4 very tough games. Cal playing much better football right now, coming off a couple nice wins. Cal will cause problems for Josh Nunes. They're the quarterback for Stanford here. Everything's leaning that way. I'm going with Cal.
All right, very good. Coming up next, We're going to talk about the Washington Redskins at the New York Giants. It's going to be my free video play. So you can see all our videos at pregame.tv, and hopefully you enjoyed this and got some pretty good insights on this is one of my
some winners.
And this is one of my favorite games of the year. The big game, it's called, in the Bay Area, and they may not say that at Nebraska and Oklahoma over the years, but that's what it is over there. So it should be a good game, and I'm going to be rooting for the dog for you, Chuck. So
thank you.
Very good.